This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website building platform to bring your business to life and succeed online, all in one place and all on your terms.
We are facing each other, both producing a continuous vocal sound. We slowly build up the tension, our faces coming closer together until we are screaming into each other's open mouths.
Within the realms of performance art, Marina Abramović is undoubtedly one of the most celebrated and controversial female artists yet known. Her work has captivated and shocked many for its intensity, its rawness, and its willingness to push the boundaries of human endurance. Although she began her career as a painter, in time she would turn her attention to performance art in the early 1970s, where she would start exploring themes of the body, pain, and trauma. She's been known to put herself in extreme physical and emotional states, testing the limits of what her body and mind could withstand, as well as how the viewing public would interact. Over the years, Abramović has continued to create challenging and innovative work. She has performed in some of the world's most prestigious museums and galleries, and her work has been featured in numerous films and documentaries, and continues to do so to this day. Together we'll be taking an intimate look at Abramović's life, from her early childhood to the woman she is today, as well as discussing her work from the rarely heard of to her most infamous, in hopes to understand what drives her to create such extreme and challenging art. Just how exactly has Marina Abramović become such a complex and fascinating figure? How does she become a pioneer in the field of performance art? And how has her work challenged and inspired audiences for decades? Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to see more content on the weird and wonderful side of art. And with that said, welcome to another video, everyone. This is the story and performance art of Marina Abramović. Marina Abramović was born on November 30th, 1946 in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, now in modern-day Serbia. Described by her as a dark place, young Marina's hometown and country were under communist dictatorship rule, with General Josip Broz Tito in charge. She often looked back on her surroundings as being terribly depressing and oppressive. However, she would also consider her and her family somewhat luckier than most. Abramović's parents were both Yugoslav partisans during World War II, who were both awarded high positions in the post-war government and celebrated as war heroes. According to Abramović, her parents' first meeting could easily be described as nothing short of a dramatic fairy tale in the midst of terrible bloodshed. Her mother, Danica, was a major in the army, fighting on the front line and protecting wounded partisans. During a German advance, she came down with typhus and was lying unconscious among the badly wounded, with a high fever and covered in a blanket. She was close to death until Marina's father, Voyan, would come across her dying body, struck by her beauty. He quickly carried her to the nearby village, where the peasants would nurse her back to health. Within just 6 months, she was back on the front line, saving yet more injured soldiers, one of which would be none other than Voyan himself, horribly wounded and bleeding to death. Instantly recognizing the man who rescued her, she sprung to action, but there was no available blood for transfusions. However, by some miracle, she discovered she had the exact same blood type as him, and so would give him her own blood, saving his life as he had saved hers. After the war, they crossed paths once again and married not long after. Her father worked with state security and the elite guard, whilst her mother directed an institute that supervised historic monuments, as well as becoming the head of a museum of art and the revolution in Belgrade. When Marina was born, her mother was leading a party meeting when a water broke. To emphasize just how committed to their political positions her parents were, Marina claimed that her mother refused to go to the hospital to give birth until the meeting was over. Marina was also born prematurely, resulting in a difficult birth. The placenta did not come out completely, causing her mother to develop sepsis. Once again, she was nearly on the verge of death and had to stay for a long period at the hospital until she recovered. Over the years, while her parents continued to work committedly to their careers, Abramović would hardly receive any parental care by either of them, resulting in her first 6 years being under the care of her maternal grandmother, Milica Lozic. Her grandmother was a deeply spiritual woman, a staunch devotee of the Orthodox Church, and Abramović's early childhood was deeply influenced by her grandmother's faith. When Abramović turned 6, her younger brother Velimir was born, and she would subsequently move back in with her parents into her family apartment. But in truth, the worst was yet to come. It's worth remembering that for the first 6 years since Marina was born, her parents at this point were practically strangers to her, only ever visiting her and her grandmother once a week. They were also increasingly distancing from each other as a married couple, possibly since before Marina was even born. Despite their love story and the initial attraction to each other during the war, their marriage was falling apart little by little with each passing year, dissolving into constant fights that would only become increasingly intense. This was attributed to many causes, one being their polar opposite backgrounds and interests. For example, her mother was from a wealthy and well-educated family, with refined tastes for the arts, and who viewed communism as a more abstract, idealistic, and even fashionable idea. Her father, on the other hand, was from a more modest and self-made military family, communist through and through, who enjoyed more simple pleasures such as drinking with his friends. It would not be long until the romance faded completely, only for them to realize how little in common they actually shared with each other. Though the further you dive into how Abramović described her childhood, it's more than likely that the main strain of their marriage was caused by her father and his love for women. Very often, he was unfaithful to Danica, making their crumbling relationship even worse and her confrontations with him more violent. Sadly, Marina too would suffer frequent violence at the hands of her mother as well. Almost on a daily basis, she was beaten and slapped by her mother for even the slightest mistakes or the most minor offences. Over time, this would develop a specific phobia within Marina, a fear of her own blood. From the beatings, her nose would bleed constantly. One time when she lost her first baby tooth, the bleeding wouldn't stop for 3 months. Fearing that she may have had leukemia, her parents took her to the hospital, where she was diagnosed for having a rare blood disorder, and she had to stay at the hospital for almost a year. This period, according to her, was the happiest time of her childhood. Quote, "Everyone in my family was now nice to me. They brought me good presents, and everybody in the hospital was kind to me. It was paradise. The doctors continued to do tests and discovered that what I had was not leukemia, but something more mysterious. Maybe some kind of psychosomatic reaction to my physical abuse. I was given all kinds of treatments, then I went back home and the slapping and beating continued, but maybe a little less frequently than before." End quote. Another method of punishment included a dark, hidden closet known as a placard that she would sometimes be locked in for hours. Abramović would give a morbid recount on her experiences with this closet as follows. "I was afraid of the dark, but this placard was filled with ghosts, spiritual presence, luminous beings, shapeless and silent, not at all frightening. I would talk to them. It felt completely normal to me that they were there. They were simply part of my reality, my life. From the moment I would turn on the light, they would vanish." End quote. Perhaps due to her mother's background in the army, young Marina was expected to endure punishments without question, expected to be toughened up into a soldier like her. But if Abramović described how her mother took complete military-style control of her, it would be quite the opposite between Marina and her father, Voyan. According to Marina, her father never punished or beat her, and this naturally drew Marina closer to him. Quote, "I remember he used to take me to carnivals and buy me sweets. When he took me out, it was rarely just the two of us. He was usually with one of his girlfriends, and the girlfriend would buy me wonderful presents, which I would bring back home. So happy, I would say, 'Oh, the beautiful blonde lady bought me all this,' and my mother would throw the presents straight out of a window." End quote. By this time in her childhood, the marriage between Voyan and Danica was as good as over, and the more Marina loved her father for his tenderness, the harsher the punishments were from her mother. However, if there was one thing left between Marina and her mother that would leave more of a positive impact on her during her childhood and throughout the rest of her life, it would be her eagerness and willingness to learn new skills within different cultures and art forms, which her mother greatly encouraged. From an early age, Marina took piano lessons and learned both English and French on a regular basis. Thanks to her parents' habit of pushing her daughter to read certain literature, Marina would also find escapism in reading books, at times only ever coming out of her bedroom to eat, then she would head back in her room, spending each hour of every day reading page after page. But most significantly, of course, young Marina took a particularly keen interest in art, and her parents, particularly her mother who adored the arts, would actively nurture this side to her personality, to a point where Marina would even have her own studio, complete with a proper easel. Marina would describe how her first paintings consisted mostly of her dreams, which Marina remembered very well and would write down, later to be painted. She recounted only using two colours each time she painted, a deep green and night blue. Quote, "I was always attracted to these two colours, I can't quite say why. For me, dreams are green and blue. I took some old curtains and made a long robe for myself in those precise colours, the colours of my dreams." End quote. As the years went by, Marina's father would buy her a set of oil paints and arrange a painting lesson with a partisan friend of his, an artist named Filo Filipović, who painted abstract landscapes. During their first lesson together, he cut out a piece of canvas on the floor, opened a can of glue and threw it on the canvas. He then proceeded to add a bit of sand, some yellow, red and black pigments. To Marina's surprise, he then poured half a litre of gasoline onto the canvas, lit a match, and everything exploded. Afterwards, he turned to Marina and said, quote, "This is a sunset." After he left and the charred remnants had dried, Marina pinned it to the wall, totally in awe of it. However, after returning home to it after going on a holiday with her family, to her disappointment, the August sun had dried out the artwork so badly that the colour was gone and the sand, ashes and pigments had all fallen on the floor. The sunset had quite simply vanished. This incident left an incredibly profound effect on her, whether she knew it at the time or not. But certainly looking back on this event later in life, Marina realised that the end result proved to be entirely insignificant when compared to what truly captivated her the most, which was the process. It was the actual making of the art that left the lasting impact, rather than what was left behind. The journey instead of the destination. Perhaps this event alone would be what truly motivated her as time went on to eventually step away from the paints and the easel to head directly towards the beckoning call of performance art. Perhaps if it weren't for this one fateful meeting arranged by her father, Marina's life would have never taken shape as it has done so to this day. By the time Marina reached her adolescence, both within and outside her family home, life continued to be a terrible challenge for her. Often she and her brother were forbidden to bring friends home due to their mother's germophobia, resulting in them being very shy and bullied by the other kids because of it. Quote, "My teenage years were desperately awkward and unhappy. In my mind, I was the ugliest kid in my school, extraordinarily ugly. I was thin and tall, and the kids called me Giraffe. I had to sit in the back of my class because I was so tall, but I could not see the board, so I could not get good grades. Finally, they figured out I needed glasses. We're not talking about normal glasses. These were the ugly kind that came from communist countries, with thick lenses and heavy frames. So I would try to break them by sitting on them, or by putting them in a window and accidentally closing it." End quote. As her teen years progressed, the loveless marriage of her parents and the ever-tense atmosphere it created in the family household not only continued, but seemed to be reaching a terrible breaking point. When Marina turned 17, her parents threw a huge party and dinner to celebrate their anniversary, 18 years of supposedly happy years of marriage. But after everybody left, the chaos started again. Marina remembered her father uncharacteristically walking into the kitchen to clean up, starting with the 12 champagne glasses that were waiting to be cleaned. Turning to her, he said, quote, "Let's wash the champagne glasses. You dry." But within moments, his father broke the first glass he picked up to wash as her mother walked in, and she exploded with rage. Quote, "They had just spent several hours pretending to be happy as she built up all of that anger and bitterness. She saw the broken glass and started yelling at my father about everything, about how clumsy he was and what a disaster their marriage was and how many women he had slept with. He just stood there and I watched silently, holding this little towel in my hand. She yelled and my father said nothing. He didn't move. It felt like a Beckett play. After many minutes of her lamenting about all the shit in their marriage, she stopped, because he was not responding. Finally, he said to her, 'Are you finished?' When she replied yes, he picked up the other champagne glasses, and one by one, he smashed all 11 on the floor. 'I can't hear this 11 more times,' he said, and he walked out of the house. This was the beginning of the end." End quote. Sure enough, Marina's father and closest elder, aside from her grandmother, left for good not long after this very incident. This affected Marina so much that she was overcome with grief and suffered a nervous breakdown. Although her father had gone, the memory of her first painting lesson that he had arranged for her years prior still energized her mind to see new ways of experiencing and indeed creating art. And art by this time had truly become her sanctuary. She continued to paint at her studio at home until another profound experience happened to her that would again encourage her to see art as more than just paint on canvas. One day, when lying on the grass and looking up at the clear sky above her, she noticed 12 military jets fly over her, leaving white trails behind them. Quote, "I watched in fascination as the trails slowly disappeared. and the sky once more became a perfect blue. All at once it occurred to me, why paint? Why should I limit myself to 2 dimensions when I can make art from anything at all? Fire, water, the human body, anything. There was something like a click in my mind. I realized that being an artist means having immense freedom. If I wanted to create something from dust or rubbish, I could do it. It was an unbelievably freeing feeling, especially from someone coming from a home where there was almost no freedom." End quote. In 1965, Marina enrolled in the painting program of the Academy of Fine Arts in Belgrade, eager to begin her life anew, hone in on her creativity, and in many ways find freedom from the shackles of her militant mother. However, even in her young adulthood, whilst living under the roof of her mother, she still had to obey many of her strict rules, including a curfew of no later than 10 p.m, which would continue right up to her late 20s. As Marina continued to paint, the less she seemed to enjoy it. She had not discovered performance art yet, but nevertheless, she couldn't help but feel something was missing. It wasn't until she started completing paintings that were instead less accurate on a technical level and instead more abstract and deliberately ambiguous that she eventually felt she was reaching closer to a breakthrough. Pictures that made the viewer, as she describes it, a participant in the artistic experience. Pictures that demanded that imagination take place and that opened the door to her unconscious. All the while, she began to meet like-minded students in the academy who shared her disillusionment of the ever-changing and increasingly corrupt communist nation they found themselves in, and who too wanted to see beyond the limits of paint and find ways to put life itself into art. She would actively join political student campaigns and protests, and attend meetings for hours at a time discussing art and how it could evolve from the conservative ways that their professors were teaching it. During this period of the 1960s, especially in the West, everything seemed to be changing drastically, not just within politics and popular music, but within art as well. No longer was art seen as merely a commodity by new emerging artists, but due to a surge and growing interest of avant-garde experimentation, new concepts, such as performance art, were beginning to garner wider attention, especially amongst younger crowds within art schools and art scenes. And the Academy of Fine Arts in Belgrade would be no exception, as these new ideas began to leak into Europe. Abramović and her closest classmates paid close attention to the new art movements emerging in America, and she in particular was eagerly drawn to the performance side of artistic expression. Finally, Marina had found a viable opportunity to work with whatever surrounded her and unite it with her creative output and emotional expression. However, from the very beginning, it was met with almost complete rejection. Although avant-garde ideas were continuing to filter into Yugoslavia, the establishment still firmly rejected most of them, including performance art. Each of her ideas to create her first solo performance were continuously rejected by the Belgrade Youth Center. It would not be until the start of the 70s, when she completed her studies in Belgrade and enrolled at the Academy of Fine Arts in Zagreb as a postgraduate, that her ideas and concepts were beginning to receive further encouragement. Not to mention that for the first time in her life, she was living outside of her home city, away from the grip of her overbearing mother. Both freedom within art and life in general now lay at her feet. In spite of this, in 1971, after finishing her studies in Zagreb, she returned to Belgrade to be reunited with her lover and fellow conceptual artist, Nesha Pelipović, who shared her passion for new ideas in art and would soon become her husband between 1971 and 1976. After returning to her home city in 1971, in October, Abramović took part in an exhibition at the Student Cultural Center, planned as a counterpoint to the official October Salon exhibition organized by the government. It was here that she exhibited her first immaterial artwork, and by now, she had all but abandoned painting altogether. By 1973, Marina was fully immersed into a new and exciting medium of performance art, and constantly chasing new ideas and concepts of how to express herself, and in particular, of how to follow her desire to capture the brutality and violence that inspired her greatly. Maybe it was this burning desire that eventually led her to her first groundbreaking and controversial performance later that same year. The first of a series of intense performances that would later be known as the Rhythm Series, called Rhythm 10 in Edinburgh, Scotland. A performance of one artist, 12 knives, and the start of what Abramović would be forever famous for, which was the relentless endurance of a human body when pushed to its absolute limits. Okay guys, really sorry to do this to you, but that is it for now until part 2. I hate to leave you guys on a bit of a cliffhanger, but I promise you, part 2 will be out no later than next week, where we'll start exploring the start of Marina Abramović's career in visceral performance art, starting with her infamous Rhythm series. From now on, I'm planning to release videos on a weekly basis whenever I can, so that means some of my documentaries will have to be split into parts. So if you're subscribed and enjoying this documentary so far, be sure to keep that notification bell on so you'll be alerted as soon as part 2 is released. Before I go, it's that time again for Artist Corner, where I get to share some artwork sent in by one of my viewers, and today's featured artist is named Lukianski, hailing from Amsterdam. Lukianski has been making art since the 80s, and over time, he has developed a chaotically beautiful and colourful style of neo-expressionist art that tackles powerful themes such as war, poverty, human suffering, and even the suffering of animals. His pieces range from small to absolutely enormous, using many different types of oil paint, acrylic paint, and aerosols. Often you'll find deep and hidden symbolism in his work underneath a rough exterior. A lot of the animals in his paintings actually represent human behaviour. For example, he tells me that the predatory animals represent the violent force that humans possess, while the more docile animals represent the goodness and tranquility of human nature, resulting in a lot of his paintings portraying a battle of good versus evil. I think his work is stunning to look at, especially his larger pieces, and I urge you all to check out more of his work online. Please head over to his Instagram to see more and keep up with his latest projects. If you're an artist and you too would potentially like to feature at one of the end of my videos, I'd love to hear from you. Please send me an email of your artwork and a bit about yourself to blinddweller@gmail.com or message me on Instagram. Don't forget to also join my art club on Discord, where you can share your art, meet other artists, or even ask me a question. Also, if you're an artist, you may want to hear what I have to share with you today from Squarespace, who kindly sponsored today's video. Sometimes when I receive requests to share artists' work on my channel, on occasion they don't have their own website for me to view their work or promote their art to others online. I know making a website can be really daunting, but that's what makes Squarespace so perfect for people like you and me. They make it super easy with their huge catalogue of professional and tweakable templates, with designs for every category to fit your unique style that will look stunning on every device. You can also display your projects in customizable galleries and even add password protected pages to share your art privately with potential clients or collectors. And if you want to start selling your artwork on your website, Squarespace offers you the tools to make a professional online store. Whether you sell physical or digital art, Squarespace has you completely covered. I've started working on a website myself because honestly I think it's about time that I did, and I eventually want to make it easier for viewers to submit their artwork to me in an all-in-one place. It's still a work in progress, but Squarespace has been amazingly helpful for me so far. So please head over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to the link I left in the description to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Here's a special shout out to all of my top tier donators: Vlad Siv, Mrs. Cal, Tyler Butler, Harley Raven, Eric Lamarca, Dave MC, Molotale, John Allen, The New Ongon 24, Equatamok, Ken B, Lee Flowers, Calvin Kai, Akaiza, Carol H, Charlie Sanchisi, Fernando Achicaro, Large Fatty or Big Chad, and Port Perea. See you soon for part 2 then, everybody. Keep being creative, and bye for now.